It seems like there are an infinite number of patterns to memorize as a guitar player. Patterns can be helpful, especially in the beginning of your guitar journey, but wouldn't it be nice to learn patterns in a way that makes them instantly usable? This video will help you bridge the gap between patterns and music. And if you skip this step, you might get stuck relying solely on the patterns that you can memorize. That's going to limit you. And this bridge that we're going to build connects common guitar chords, especially the ones we use heavily in the blues, with common scales, especially ones we use heavily in the blues. So connecting chords and scales like this will help you see the fretboard in a more holistic way. It helped me, and I wish that I learned this much sooner in my personal guitar journey. So, ready to dig in? Let's get to it. Most guitar players start out learning a few chords, right? G, C, and D. Anybody? And this gets you in the game, but at some point you're probably going to want to play a little lick or a cool solo over these chords. So naturally you learn some scale patterns. And for a lot of us, chords and scales just seem like a completely separate concept. They stand on their own, and they're often taught that way. And you might even practice them as if they're completely unrelated to each other, but they're really deeply connected. Let me show you what I mean. Let's take a look at this G major bar chord. We're barring across all 6 strings and rooting the chord on the 3rd fret of the 6th string. This shape. Now let's build a scale around this. Let's start with the major scale, and that way we can attach the major scale to this shape and this shape to the major scale so that they kind of blend together into one thing rather than 2 separate things. Now for the major scale, we need a pattern of whole steps, which is just 2 frets on the guitar, and half steps, which is just 1 fret on the guitar. Here's the pattern. We go whole from our root, then whole again, and we could come up, but let's stay in position and move up to the 5th string, and our whole step is going to be at the 2nd fret. So up a string and back a fret from where we started. Then we need a half step, so that's just 1 fret. Then we go whole, whole again, crossing strings, whole, and finally half. So quickly we have whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And that's just on the lower strings. We can continue 1 more octave starting from this G note on the 4th string, 5th fret. Let's do that. So there's our root. We need a whole step. So same thing, shift up a string and then down a fret from kind of where we're positioned here. That's the 2nd fret. Whole again, half, then whole. And this one's different because of the tuning of the 2nd string. We don't reach back to the 2nd fret. We just go to the 3rd. Whole, whole, and then half. So now we can link these 2 things together. Check this out. Now, maybe you notice that each of the notes of the bar chord showed up when I played the scale. So these 2 concepts are really coming from the same place, and we want to start using it that way. Let's start by just putting a little chord on the looper, or you can just strum and then play. And what I want to do is play around with the notes. And just improvise something. It can be as simple or complicated as you like, but start using these 2 things as related to each other. That's the idea. But we can keep going. Each major chord fits perfectly within the major scale, but because the major pentatonic scale is just 5 of the 7 major scale notes, it also fits perfectly. To build the major pentatonic scale around this chord shape, we can start with the root and go up a whole step and then up another whole step. So far, identical to the major scale, but here's where we depart. We're going to go up 1.5 steps. So that's 3 frets on the guitar. And then we're going up a whole step from there, and then we're going up another 1.5 steps back to the root. So if we map that out, you can think of this as the Migral scale. Right? It's an easy way to keep that in mind. And of course, we can go another octave as well from our root now on the 4th string, 5th fret. That's a G. So we'll go up a whole step, up another whole step, up a whole and a half, and you can see it visually here. It's that same 3 fret distance, 1, 2, 3, but we want to stay in position so we can play that same note here, and then up a whole step, and then up another 1.5 steps, which we can play there. You can see it a little more easily here though, but it's that G note right there on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Right? So we can take this and use this to create some really cool licks that maybe have a little bit more of a stripped down version than just using the major scale. Let's play over that same bar chord. Even just that simple little lick there uses those notes from the G major pentatonic scale and omits the others from the full major scale. Perfect match for sure, but a lot of the music that we gravitate to isn't so perfect. That perfect match is a nice baseline. It serves as a really good grounding point for us, but how do we give this a little dash of mojo? The blues ignores the rules in a few ways, and one big way is by mixing major and minor tones. And I'm not talking about throwing in an E minor into your G, C, and D. It actually sounds nice and it really follows all the rules. Instead, what I'm talking about is mixing the minor third of a single chord with the major third of that same chord. Think G minor and G major in the same measure. And that actually puts the minor pentatonic scale on the table for a major chord. Now let's wrap the minor pentatonic scale around this chord shape. To do that, we're going to start with the root, same as before, and we're going to go up 1.5 steps. So that is going to give us a minor third interval. That's 3 frets. This is where we are departing from what we've done in the major scale and the major pentatonic scale. Before, we played that whole step and then went up another whole step. Here we're skipping that whole step and just splitting the difference there and playing that minor third interval, 1.5 steps up from the root. And this is part of what gives the minor pentatonic scale its bluesy, edgier vibe. Now we need a whole step from there. We can play it here on the 5th string at the 3rd fret, another whole step, and then another 1.5 steps, and we can play that up a string at the 3rd fret, and then finally a whole step. So here's our minor pentatonic scale that nests really nicely around that big bar chord shape. All right, but we can keep going as before and start here and play the minor pentatonic scale from the 4th string root. That's at the 5th fret in G. So from here, we're going to play that 1.5 steps, and we can find it by going here, but we'll just show you where it is on the 3rd string, 3rd fret. Then we know we got to come up a whole step, so that's here. Then we come up another whole step, so the D note on the 2nd string, 3rd fret, and then here's that 1.5 steps, and you get to see this play out visually by going up from the 3rd fret up to the 6th fret, and then finally up another whole step for the root. So wrapping it around our chord shape, really linking these two together, we get So just as before, I'm going to play the G major chord with the looper pedal, and I'm going to just kind of improvise and noodle around a little bit with the notes of the G minor pentatonic scale. You'll definitely hear a rub, and that rub is kind of that bluesier, rockier edge that playing the minor pentatonic scale over a major chord gives you. It's blurring the lines between major and minor, and it's part of what makes the blues sound like the blues. Let's listen. But we can get a little bit bluesier than that. Let's play the minor pentatonic scale over a dominant 7th chord, G7. In the blues, we often play 7th chords instead of a plain major chord because, well, just listen. Because 7th chords have the flat 7 tone in them, that makes the minor pentatonic scale perfect complement, but we've already heard that. So let's hear something a little bit different that also incorporates that same flat 7 tone, Mixolydian. If we go back to our big G major bar chord rooted on the 6th string at the 3rd fret, got a nice G major chord, but we can take this into a bluesier sound just by lifting the little finger off the 4th string where it was playing the G note. And if we do that, we're going to be playing the 4th string at the 3rd fret under the bar. So make sure you've got a really good bar there, and that gives us a G7. And you could play different scales to really match this, but one that I really like that gives us a lot of note choices, a kind of full sound, is Mixolydian. So if we map out the Mixolydian around this scale shape, we have our root, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. And so far, that's the exact same as the G major scale. But instead of going up to the major 7th, F sharp, we're going to just come up to F, right? And that makes sense because that's the note that we had to modify in order to get that dominant 7th sound. Then, of course, we finish with the octave. And we could continue this, root, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, flat 7, and then the root again. Now if we play a G7 chord, just with my looper here, and play the notes, you can hear how we've got a lot of options here and how featuring that F note, F natural, really gets us into a bluesier sound. But because we're including all the notes of Mixolydian, we get some really nice color that we can use to outline this chord shape. You see, we can play a major pentatonic, or even the minor pentatonic scale over a G major chord, or we can lean into the grit of the blues and play minor pentatonic and even Mixolydian over G7. We have a lot of options. Now here's the cool thing. These options are attached to each other. The scale and the chord are linked. So view them as part of the same thing and you're going to do well. You'll start seeing the chord as sort of the boundary, the framework from which to pull your scale tones from. And that's the real key to this, getting the sound that you're after. You got to watch out because there's a trap here. You can get right back to where you started and just rely on patterns if you practice by playing a chord and then just running the scale pattern that surrounds it. You should do that. That's a great way to get started. But once your fingers know where the notes are, take this one step further. This is when things start to click. Let me show you what I mean. In that example, I used the scale to just kind of jam over the chord and craft the sound that I'm looking for. That was Mixolydian. And I want you to do that. I want you to learn the chord and then learn the scale that surrounds the chord. But most importantly, as soon as your fingers know where the scale tones are, start to use it. Play a simple little lick, a note or two, just to bring out some of the tones from the scale and really get into how those color the chord. This is going to help you actually play music that's related to the chord and pull the sound that you're looking for out of it. You'll start to see what's available right next to a chord that you already know. Seeing chords and scales as part of the same thing can really take your playing to the next level. But the thing is, this is just the beginning of truly understanding the fretboard. So click here to watch this video next to learn the underlying principle that connects scales and chords so you can finally make sense of the fretboard. I'll see you over there. Until then, practice smart and play on.